What makes someone the best in their field throughout history? An artist, for example, a musician, a scientist. When we asked one of the best, this was their answer. I am not a genius. I just have an insatiable curiosity. Another person said, yes, maybe I can't quote famous writers, but I have something much more valuable: experience. Two things emerge from all these answers: curiosity and experience. And today we will talk about someone who is not only the best in the world in one field that combines these two things, but who is also among the best in history in every discipline he has touched, and who has brilliantly transferred what he has learned from every discipline he has experienced to other disciplines. We're talking about Leonardo da Vinci, considered by some to be the most talented person humanity has ever seen. No matter how you look at his smile, those eyes watching you, how we can tell the traitor at the Last Supper from the posture of his body, the anatomy, engineering, science, technology, architecture, background, autonomous vehicles, flying machines, submarines, bridge designs, and all the talents we will detail shortly behind these reveal to us why Da Vinci had such a unique mind. Because Da Vinci saw the inside of everything he looked at and followed the advice of another Renaissance genius he admired, Leon Battista Alberti. A good artist must see the human body from the inside out. First the skeleton, then the muscles and skin, and finally the clothing. More like an anatomist than an artist, this was one of the things that made the Mona Lisa so unique. Behind Mona Lisa's gaze lay all the elements of human anatomy. Behind her was a tremendous amount of scientific knowledge and experience, ranging from dissected bodies to years of observation. So how did Da Vinci acquire this knowledge? He was born on April 15, 1452, in the village of Vinci near Florence, Italy, to a 25-year-old notary and a peasant woman out of wedlock. Some say that being born out of wedlock was his greatest fortune, because his father, said Piero, was a notary. According to the customs of the time, male children traditionally continued their father's profession, but since he did not grow up in a traditional family environment, this obligation was not placed on his shoulders. Can you imagine Leonardo da Vinci spending his life as a notary? I'm not saying this to disparage notary work or any profession, but some people are simply not suited for certain jobs. Leonardo showed signs of this from childhood. Later, when Leonardo began living with his father, said Piero didn't want this either. He recognized his son's talents and guided him in that direction. This was Leonardo's other great fortune, a father who recognized his talents. Again, because he was a child born out of wedlock, he couldn't attend the schools that everyone else could go to. He started attending a school that could be called a vocational school, where he acquired practical knowledge that he could use in various fields, especially mathematics. But his school life was almost non-existent. Whatever Da Vinci would learn, he would learn on his own. In this respect, his greatest opportunity would be moving to Florence with his father when he was just 12 years old. Florence was a major center of enlightenment at the time. Before he turned 15, again under his father's guidance, he would begin working as an apprentice in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the best of the era. And from the very first day, it was clear that he had great talent. We can see this in the works that came out of Verrocchio's workshop between 1470 and 1475, when he was still an apprentice to Verrocchio. For example, if you look at the painting The Baptism of Christ, which came out of Verrocchio's workshop, and according to some sources was painted by several apprentices, while according to others it belongs to Verrocchio, the entire painting belongs to Verrocchio and other painters, but the angel here was painted by the young Leonardo. There's a significant technical difference between this angel and the other angel next to it, which is thought to be Verrocchio's. This is what sets Leonardo apart from the others from the very beginning. He made a tremendous mark on painting with the sfumato technique, which brings objects and figures together with blurred, soft transitions instead of sharp lines, and he showed his potential to the world for the first time. Rumor has it that Leonardo surpassed his master in every way, sparking debates about the student surpassing the master. After these debates, Verrocchio completely stopped painting. However, Verrocchio, who had not received a proper education and had even learned to read and write very late, would be a great opportunity for the young Leonardo. For example, in a cathedral project undertaken by Verrocchio, it is thought that Leonardo made a significant contribution to the engineering designs, including how a giant sphere would be placed on top of the dome. In addition, according to an interesting rumor, when we look at Verrocchio's statue of David, we're actually looking at Leonardo. Yes, it's seriously thought that Leonardo posed for this statue. The possibility that young Leonardo directly showed himself is truly a wonderful thought. At this point, I think it's very important to digress to the Medici family in order to understand the atmosphere of the period, the sparks of the Renaissance, and what the value given to art could lead to. Especially Leonardo da Vinci's patron, Lorenzo Medici, also known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, and the Medici family that started this tradition. The wealthy families of the time attached tremendous importance to art. They would allocate a portion of the money they earned in various sectors to art and artists, either through direct funding or by connecting artists with the right people. Lorenzo Medici would become Leonardo's patron alongside Verrocchio, Sandro Botticelli, Domenico Ghirlandaia, and Michelangelo. I am planning a more comprehensive video about this family and how they started the Renaissance, but the turning point in Leonardo's story would again be Lorenzo introducing him to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan at the time. When Lorenzo sent Da Vinci to the Duke of Milan, Ludovico, with the pretext of presenting him with a musical instrument, his real intention was to introduce him to the world stage. Leonardo, of course, did not miss this opportunity. Although he had just started earning money for the first time in Florence, he left that job and set off to Milan. Incidentally, the work he left unfinished is noteworthy: the Adoration of the Magi. The work had been commissioned by the San Donato Monastery, and even in its unfinished state, it was one of the first examples of Leonardo's understanding of perspective, detail, and architecture. A recent scan of this work using modern techniques revealed sketches by Da Vinci that had never been seen before. For those who happen to be in the area, this work is still on display at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Let's return to Milan. When Da Vinci went to Lorenzo, he may have taken with him what was perhaps the first CV in history. Yes, Da Vinci had prepared a resume detailing how he could serve the Duke. Here he showcased the talents that would make him Leonardo da Vinci as we know him today. The interesting thing is that many people know him as an artist. He mentioned his artistic identity as a footnote when introducing himself. He may have done this to get the job and impress his new prospective patron. However, he emphasized his engineering and military skills as his main talents, mentioning that he could carry out military engineering projects like war machines, siege engines, bridges, and underwater systems. Since wars were raging for most of that period, these skills were highly valuable, and the Duke must have liked his resume, because Da Vinci entered his patronage and began his 17-year adventure in Milan. The Duke intended to make the most of Leonardo. On the one hand, he commissioned him to design lavish banquets for the court. On the other, he wanted him to paint and sculpt. But the Duke didn't stop there. He also asked Leonardo to design weapons, buildings, and machines. From 1985 to 1940, he continued to work on whatever came to mind. He tackled everything from nature to flying machines, from geometry to mechanics, from urban planning to canal construction and architecture. He designed all kinds of structures, from churches to castles. He even designed the main dome for the Milan Cathedral, one of Europe's largest Gothic cathedrals today, but his design was not used. His work during this period also included advanced technology weapons. He designed tanks and other war vehicles, various war tools, and even submarines. At the same time, we also began to see his first anatomical studies during this period. These anatomical studies and the Vitruvian Man that emerged from them represent the pinnacle of his wisdom in this field. Inspired by the proportions explained by the famous ancient Roman architect and writer Marcus Vitruvius Polius in his work Architectura, this drawing known as the Vitruvian Man actually reflects Leonardo's knowledge accumulated in many fields, and at its core, his entire philosophy. This is because Leonardo embraced the human-centered philosophy at the heart of the Renaissance, even believing that the delicate, perfect proportions of the human body could inspire architecture. Other artists also drew the Vitruvian Man. However, Leonardo's work possessed a perfect proportion in terms of both aesthetics and art, as well as scientific accuracy. We can say that it was almost scientifically flawless. This is because Leonardo went beyond observing the human body and dissected over 30 known corpses and documented them in detail, while also using his artistic talent to depict them perfectly. From cross-sectional images of the skull to flawless drawings of the human heart, it is necessary to mention the collection of notes he took along with these drawings and sketches. The reason we say collection is that Leonardo has over 6,000 drawings that have survived to this day. 6,000 pages, and what's even more astonishing is that an estimate, this is not even a quarter of all his notes. Look, it's incredible that such a talented mind produced such detailed and comprehensive art, science, engineering, war technology, architecture, and so many other fields. Finding so many sources is a great opportunity for all of humanity, perhaps the greatest legacy that could be left behind. And look, forget the numbers. The content of the drawings, the sketches, is another source of amazement. As we mentioned, observing and understanding them is one thing, but conveying them so accurately and aesthetically is an incredible feat. Anyway, putting our astonishment aside and looking at his notes, beyond his detailed drawings related to human anatomy, we encounter a scientist and engineer. Here, the reason for calling him ahead of his time is hidden in these pages. For example, there was a machine design that could transport 1 million tons of soil per hour using water power automation, a carrier tank design, a tank that could fire in all directions, and even a type of autonomous vehicle design whose functionality we are still unsure about. Some might see a robot here, but beyond that, these pages actually contain prophecies of our modern world. They can be seen as the inspiration for the engineering projects behind many of the vehicles we use today, especially flying machines. He had a big obsession with them anyway. His designs were constantly inspired by nature, so he also dreamed of flying. Birds were also a source of inspiration for him. From a young age, we see countless designs related to birds in his notes. His notes and sketches contain drawings with all the details from the flapping of wings to the interactions in their anatomy. Based on this, he had even designed a type of helicopter, attachable wings, and a parachute. But did you know that there is also a trace of our history in these notes? Leonardo's thousands of pages of notes have, of course, been collected over time and compiled into different codices. Bill Gates even paid $30 million for the work known as the Leicester Codex. One of these works is the Atlanticus Codex. Looking at the corner of this codex, a bridge design catches the eye. Do you know where Leonardo designed this bridge for? For the Golden Horn in Istanbul. In 1502, Leonardo da Vinci wrote a letter to Bayezid I. In this letter, he proposed a bridge design to be built over the Golden Horn in Istanbul. It was a crazy project because the bridge Leonardo proposed would be 360 meters long, 24 meters wide, and 40 meters high. For that period, these dimensions were enormous, and it was almost impossible to build with the technology available at the time. The most striking feature of the bridge was that it had a single arch. This would allow ships to pass underneath and would not obstruct river traffic. The bridge was also designed to be resistant to natural disasters such as storms and earthquakes. However, Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I did not accept this project. It was probably deemed unfeasible due to the scale and cost of the project. In 2019, researchers from MIT published an analysis showing that Leonardo's original design was indeed feasible and could have been built with the materials available at the time. But of course, given the conditions of the era, with resources being allocated to necessary areas for a city conquered only half a century earlier, it was highly probable that this project would not have been accepted. Returning to Milan, Leonardo had undertaken many projects with the support of Sforza. But there was a problem. As we can understand from his notes, Leonardo's interests were so broad, and he was constantly curious about new subjects, that he left most of his projects unfinished. In fact, during this 17-year period, he was only able to complete 6 works, and this project was either left unfinished or never realized. He spent most of his time on scientific studies. He would either go out into nature to observe, shut himself in his workshop to examine corpses, or brainstorm about the secrets of the universe. Unfortunately, science and technology could not keep up with Leonardo's mind, so many of his seemingly perfect designs remained on paper. However, one of the works he did complete was the famous The Last Supper, which he painted on the wall of the monastery. This work was also a reflection of science and art. Of course, this work, brought to life by his knowledge of anatomy and even reflecting the attitudes of the characters in the work, creates an effect that makes you feel lost in the architectural elements when you look at it. But the most important thing that makes this work so significant is that it is, in a sense, a photograph. Let's explain. The Last Supper was the final meal Jesus shared with his disciples before his crucifixion, and this painting depicts the moment he told them that one of them would betray him. Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," at the very moment you see in this painting, and we bear witness to that moment. Each of the apostles displays different emotions in their dramatic reactions upon hearing this: surprise, anger, questioning, accusation. Leonardo depicts each apostle's expression with a deep psychological insight, and the apostles' group posture and interactions with each other bring movement and liveliness to the scene. Leonardo has placed Jesus Christ at the very center of the work. Jesus' hands are shown open to both sides. This posture gives Jesus a sacred authority, while also showing his serenity and acceptance of his fate. Judas Iscariot, the disciple who will betray him, is placed slightly further back and in the shadows. Judas is depicted holding a money bag, which is thought to symbolize the 30 pieces of silver he received in exchange for betraying Jesus. Leonardo masterfully handles the theme of betrayal in the scene. Notably, there is no violence or overly dramatic movement. On the contrary, everything is rendered with emotional depth and controlled calm. This was perhaps one of the reasons Leonardo was unable to complete many of his works: his tremendous attention to detail. By the end of his time in Milan, Ludovico Sforza's deposition in 1499 would bring his Milan adventure to an end. A period of almost 15 years of wandering would begin. Traveling from city to city, Leonardo returned to Florence, where his story began, received support from Giuliano Medici of the Medici family, and began work on what he considered the pinnacle of his career, a work that he himself felt was never truly complete. To Mona Lisa. According to one theory, this work, known as Lady Lisa, from the word Mona meaning lady, belonged to Lisa Gherardini, the wife of Francesco del Giocondo, a silk merchant living in Florence. As mentioned, it is a masterpiece that, in a sense, reveals the knowledge he acquired from all disciplines. While many people understandably fail to grasp why this seemingly ordinary portrait of a woman has caused such a stir, it gains meaning when viewed as a reflection of the mind of an unrelenting genius, beyond the details it contains. But of course, we must also mention the details. As mentioned earlier, the most important detail of the Mona Lisa, painted using the sfumato technique, is undoubtedly her mysterious smile. We can see the mechanics behind that smile in his notes. The sketches he drew based on the bodies he studied show that he tried to understand the movement of all the muscles behind the lips and capture their harmony with the rest of the face. In fact, when we look at those notes, we also see a design for the Mona Lisa's lips. Leonardo first imagined that smile. But what about the eyes? No matter where you look, they seem to follow you. As you can see, this is no coincidence. His obsessive interest in perspective and our sense of sight extended to the retina behind the eye, and even to the receptors. What did Leon Battista say? A good artist must see the human body from the inside out. First the skeleton, then the muscles and skin, and finally the clothing, like an anatomist rather than an artist. That's why the Mona Lisa is so valuable. It is not a painting, but rather a photograph of a living woman, depicted with her entire anatomy at that moment. As if at that moment, before starting his work, Leonardo made a joke and said, "Mona Lisa is about to start smiling," and the expression on her face is immortalized and is more than just a collection of anatomical details. It's like a manifestation of Leonardo's desire to combine science and art, to which he devoted his entire life. After the death of his patron Giuliano Medici in 1516, Leonardo was invited to France by King Francis I, a great admirer of Leonardo's mind. Francis invited him to France, assigned him a house near the castle on the banks of the Loire River, and Leonardo spent the last years of his life there in great prosperity, focusing on his unfinished works and wanting to refine the Mona Lisa even further. In 1519, at the age of 67, he passed away in that same house. According to some sources, he died in the arms of the tearful King Francis I. This was the story of Leonardo da Vinci, who used what he learned from science and his art and brought the beauty and complexity of science and art to life. He never received a formal education in the sense we know it today. He learned everything through an unstoppable curiosity, observing the world, life, humanity, and nature. Thanks to the notes he took with the pen he never put down, he left us a tremendous legacy. This is the story of a genius. As always, until we meet again, thank you for being here. With love.